The history of American railways began in the early 19th century when the United States was still a young and rapidly growing nation. At that time, transportation across the country was extremely difficult. People traveled mainly by horse, wagon, rivers, and ships. Roads were rough and dangerous, and journeys that covered long distances often took weeks or even months. As industries started growing and cities expanded, Americans realized they needed a faster and more reliable transportation system. Around the same time, steam engine technology from Europe began changing transportation forever. This invention inspired American businessmen and engineers to build railroads across the country. In the 1820s and 1830s, the first railroads in America were constructed. One of the earliest and most important railway companies was the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, commonly known as the B&O Railroad, established in 1827. These early trains were powered by steam engines and traveled on short tracks connecting nearby towns and ports. Although the trains were slow and noisy, people were amazed by their speed compared to horse wagons. Railroads quickly proved that they could transport passengers and goods much faster than traditional methods. As railroad technology improved, railway lines spread rapidly throughout the eastern United States. Cities like New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and Chicago became connected by rail networks. Factories could now send products to distant markets quickly, while farmers could transport crops to large cities before they spoiled. Railroads became the backbone of the growing American economy. Businesses expanded faster than ever before, and trade between states increased dramatically. Building railroads was extremely difficult work. Thousands of laborers worked long hours under dangerous conditions. Workers had to cut through mountains, clear forests, build bridges, and lay tracks across rivers and deserts. Many immigrants, especially Irish and Chinese workers, played a major role in constructing America's railroads. They faced harsh weather, low wages, accidents, and deadly diseases, yet they continued working because railroad jobs offered opportunities for survival and a better future. By the 1840s and 1850s, railroads were transforming American society. Small villages located near railway stations quickly turned into busy towns. Hotels, shops, factories, and markets were built around railroad hubs. Railroads also changed how Americans experienced time. Before railways, every town followed its own local time based on the sun. But train schedules required standard timing systems. This eventually led to the creation of standardized time zones across the United States. As the nation expanded westward, Americans dreamed of connecting the East Coast with the Pacific Ocean. During the mid-1800s, thousands of settlers moved west searching for gold, land, and new opportunities. However, traveling west remained dangerous and exhausting. Wagon journeys across the continent often took several months and many travelers died from disease, starvation, or attacks. Government leaders and businessmen believed that a transcontinental railroad could unite the nation and accelerate economic growth. The American Civil War, fought from 1861 to 1865, showed how important railroads had become. Both the Union and Confederate armies used trains to transport soldiers, weapons, food, and medical supplies. Railroads gave the North a huge advantage because the Union had a much larger and more developed rail network. Military leaders realized that rail transportation could decide the outcome of wars. During the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln strongly supported the construction of a transcontinental railroad. In 1862, Congress passed the Pacific Railway Act, which authorized the construction of the first railway connecting the eastern and western parts of the United States. Two companies were assigned the massive project. The Central Pacific Railroad began building eastward from California, while the Union Pacific Railroad built westward from Nebraska. Construction officially began in 1863. The work was incredibly challenging. Central Pacific workers had to blast tunnels through the Sierra Nevada mountains using explosives. Meanwhile, Union Pacific crews crossed vast plains filled with extreme weather conditions and occasional conflicts with Native American tribes. Thousands of Chinese laborers worked for Central Pacific, while Irish immigrants formed much of the Union Pacific workforce. These workers endured freezing winters, scorching deserts, dangerous explosions, and constant physical exhaustion. Many lost their lives during construction. Finally, on May 10, 1869, one of the greatest moments in American history took place at Promontory Summit, Utah. The tracks of the two railroads met, completing the first transcontinental railroad. A ceremonial, golden spike, was driven into the final section of track to celebrate the achievement. For the first time, Americans could travel from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean entirely by rail. What once required months of dangerous travel could now be completed in about a week. The Transcontinental Railroad changed America forever. After the railroad's completion, Western settlement increased rapidly. New towns and cities emerged across the western frontier. Farmers moved west to cultivate land, miners searched for gold and silver, and businesses expanded into previously isolated regions. Railroads transported people, livestock, raw materials, and manufactured goods across enormous distances. America's economy grew at an extraordinary pace. The railroad industry also created some of the richest businessmen in American history. Powerful railroad tycoons such as Cornelius Vanderbilt, Leland Stanford, James J. Hill, and Jay Gould controlled vast railway empires. These men invested heavily in tracks, locomotives, steel production, and transportation companies. Railroads became symbols of wealth, industrial power, and modern technology. However, the rapid expansion of railroads also created major problems. Some railroad companies became monopolies and abused their power by charging unfair prices. Farmers and small businesses often suffered because shipping costs were extremely high. Corruption became common in the railroad industry, and scandals involving bribery and illegal business practices damaged public trust. In response, the U.S. government introduced regulations to control railroad companies and protect consumers. By the late 19th century, the United States possessed the largest railroad network in the world. Steam locomotives became icons of American progress. Massive black engines pulled passenger cars and freight trains across thousands of miles of track. Railroads connected nearly every major city and many rural communities. Americans could travel farther and faster than ever before. Newspapers, mail, food, and products moved quickly across the nation, helping unite the country culturally and economically. Railroads also changed American culture and daily life. Luxury passenger trains became popular among wealthy travelers. Elegant train cars included dining rooms, sleeping cabins, and observation lounges. Long-distance rail travel became a symbol of adventure and sophistication. Famous trains such as the California Zephyr and the Super Chief carried passengers across breathtaking landscapes including mountains, deserts, and plains. At the same time, railroads played a role in darker chapters of American history. Native American tribes lost much of their land as railroad expansion encouraged Western settlement. Buffalo populations were destroyed, and many indigenous communities were forced onto reservations. Railroads helped industrial growth but also accelerated environmental destruction and displacement of native peoples. In the early 20th century, railroad technology improved dramatically. Steam locomotives became larger and more powerful. Rail companies introduced safer braking systems, stronger steel tracks, and improved signaling technology. During the 1930s and 1940s, diesel locomotives began replacing steam engines. Diesel trains required less maintenance, operated more efficiently, and could travel longer distances without stopping. Electric trains also appeared in some major urban regions. Railroads played another critical role during both World War I and World War II. Millions of soldiers and huge amounts of military equipment were transported by train. Factories producing tanks, weapons, and supplies depended heavily on railway transportation. American railroads became essential to the war effort and demonstrated their strategic importance once again. After World War II, however, railroads faced serious competition. The rise of automobiles changed American transportation habits. New highways allowed people to travel by car almost anywhere in the country. At the same time, commercial aviation expanded rapidly. Airplanes offered faster travel over long distances, causing passenger train numbers to decline sharply. Many railroad companies struggled financially as fewer people traveled by train. By the 1960s, passenger rail service in America was collapsing. Numerous train routes were canceled, and some railway companies went bankrupt. In response, the U.S. government created Amtrak in 1971. Amtrak became the national passenger rail service responsible for maintaining important train routes across the country. Although passenger rail never regained its former dominance, Amtrak helped preserve long-distance train travel in the United States. While passenger trains declined, freight railroads remained extremely important. American freight trains became some of the longest and heaviest trains in the world. Railroads transported coal, oil, automobiles, chemicals, grain, and industrial products across the country at low cost. Freight rail remains one of the most efficient methods of transportation in the United States today. Modern American railroads use advanced technology including computerized traffic systems, satellite tracking, automated signals, and powerful diesel-electric locomotives. High-speed rail systems, common in countries like Japan and China, have developed slowly in America, though projects continue to be discussed and tested in certain regions. The Northeast Corridor, connecting cities such as Washington, D.C., New York, and Boston, remains one of the busiest passenger rail routes in the nation. Today, the United States has one of the largest railway networks on Earth, with hundreds of thousands of miles of track. Freight railroads continue to play a massive role in the American economy by moving millions of tons of goods every year. Historic steam locomotives and railway museums preserve the memory of the railroad age, attracting tourists and history enthusiasts from around the world. The history of American railways is more than just the story of trains. It is the story of industrial growth, national unity, technological innovation, immigration, sacrifice, and economic transformation. Railroads helped build modern America by connecting distant regions, creating cities, expanding industries, and shaping the nation's identity. From the first steam locomotives of the 1830s to today's advanced freight systems, railroads remain one of the most important chapters in the history of the United States.